welcome everybody. Just as an FYI, we're recording the session, and there'll be time to ask questions and introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know where you're calling from. And I should say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And just FYI, for those of you who've been coming to these, you know that we say that this isn't for financial advice. This is a opportunity for the Google community to share knowledge about finance and, how to become financially independent and, how to learn more about how to manage money. So it's not financial advice, but really the purpose is to support the community here and have these really awesome conversations. And, my name's Terry O'Connor. Again, you've probably seen me. I'm the founder of The Brass. I'm a Google alum. I've been in finance for many years and recruiting. And Steph is also on the call. And we are very excited to bring to you Rachel Loui. She's a Google alum as well, founder of Hacking Fears and Strategic Growth Factor. She's a fractional chief AI strategist and much more. I'm going to pass it off to Rachel because she's going to really take us through an incredible journey about overcoming our financial fear. So Rachel, I'll pass it to you. And thank you so much for being here. We're very excited to spend the next 3 sessions with you. And thank you so much for, joining and wanting to share your knowledge.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. So first, I always like to start out with how the heck did I get into Hacking Fears? So after I left Google, I became a fractional chief commercial officer. And as the name infers, I help companies and founders make more money, sales, marketing, etc. And I realized whether you're fundraising, selling to customers, or for those who are solopreneurs, asking for client work and charging your market value, what was stopping the aspiring superstars and differentiate them from the ones who are really making the big bucks was that hesitation, that fear of asking for more. And so I realized if there's a way to get founders, entrepreneurs, business leaders, and specifically women to feel more comfortable asking for more, then their companies become successful, their teams become more successful, and it's not just bringing in more money, but it's the aftermath of all the good things that will happen when women ask for their worth. And so that's how I started Hacking Fears. And so that being said, one of the fears people have is talking about money. So people don't like to be interactive. They don't want to be vulnerable when it comes to money. So first, we're going to hack our fears about that. We're going to be highly interactive. So we're going to ask for people to type in comments on the chat, which will not be recorded. It's going to require vulnerability, but I also encourage you to look at the chat and see what everyone else says, because I think the aha for a lot of people is, oh, my hesitations are very similar to other people's hesitations. And in fact, my fears are quite normal. It's just whether or not I take the proactive steps to kind of get over those fears so that I can ask for my worth and make my company or my team successful. So I hope you guys are all ready to learn. That being said, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. I am, however, a business coach. And so just for context of how I came up with Hacking Fears and how it informs my corporate side business, Strategic Growth Factor, is I actually came from the pharmaceutical world before Google. And I say this because, as you know, nothing gets through the FDA without data. So anything related to the body, the brain, anything, I only care about what has been clinically proven through clinical trials and studies and whatnot. And we all know that if people want to get over their hesitations or fears, exposure therapy is kind of the tried and true, like, hey, let's take little baby steps and get more comfortable so that what seemed scary a long time ago is not so scary. The second part is, why am I so passionate about helping specifically founders? Before Google, I was also not only a founder of my own health tech startup, but I was involved in the Silicon Valley ecosystem. And, money matters a lot for the survival of a startup, especially in today's economy. So I want to make sure that every founder, leader has their best chance of doing well. And that always requires generating revenue. And lastly, the things that I had learned in that path actually was very helpful in my time at Google. So at Google, I managed international growth for US-based advertisers. And what I did was say, hey, look, there's tons of data, there's tons of tools within Google. Let's put it in business context of in your US business, you want to expand internationally, you want to, get deeper into certain markets. How can Google's tools and products help you? And I say this because when I help people think of the possibilities of what the revenue stream can look like, I say if there's the US, but the US is 4% of the world population. There's a whole little world of opportunities out there. So let's kind of think bigger, one of which being, let's think of how big your business could be. So that being said, we're going to take our first interactive exercise. And so I have everyone just take out their phones. And in your phones, I want you to just type in on a notes page the ending of the sentence. The ending is, I provide value, but fear stops me from blank. What is that blank? And then I challenge you to ask yourself, what is the benefit of asking your worth? So for example, I've heard others say, for example, fear stops me from asking for a raise. But the benefit of asking for a raise is that not only am I, helping my family and growing my bank account, but it's also equalizing the pay disparity between men and women. It could be, hey, I'm showing what leadership looks like, where I'm holding my ground of what my what my worth is. There's a million ways where by you looking into your fears and kind of looking at what the benefit would be will help you see, oh, there's actually a real reason I should be asking for my worth. And I think Terry's going to read out. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll give a couple of minutes to have everyone write that.
Yeah, we could, if you want to write it in your phone, you can also drop it in the chat and we can compare notes. I'm happy to start in the chat.
The chat's coming through.
I don't see anything yet, but I did add something, Rachel, because I love this question. I provide value, but fear stops me from being rejected.
Yes.
Right. And what's the benefit of me asking my worth? Well, I mean, you overcome rejection, but then it goes to what you were talking about, where you increase your ability to, kind of build on that ask, if you ask for more. But I think it really does something intrinsically inside. It does this, it adds to our self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
That's just been my experience in like overcoming the fear of rejection.
Yes. I've done these workshops a couple of times, and that is probably the most common fear. It is a bit of that imposter syndrome, like, oh, am I worth this amount? And then also, if I ask and they say no, does that actually mean I'm not worth this amount? And, some people can spiral into a sense of worthlessness so they're afraid to ask in the first place. And, I'll be transparent about this one too. When I first started my business, of course, I was nervous about asking my worth just like everyone else. And I thought, well, if I ask for too much, and especially if I'm working with founders and they can't afford me, do I lose business? But then, what I started telling people is, look, if I charge you X amount of money and I can't make that back for you, like money back guarantee, and you shouldn't hire me. And so then I had a dollar amount where I thought, I need to make you at least this amount to prove my worth. So not only am I getting the money I deserve, but you're getting the money that you're hoping to get. So it becomes a win-win. And so it's helping you kind of reframe. But first you need to identify what it is that you're fearful of.
Yeah, and back to your point, we have a few people who are, sharing their fears. It's the fear of feeling arrogant. There's a few people we have, and there's some that share that. The fear of, let me scroll here. Just even the fear of pitching services to clients.
Yes.
In the fear of stress.
Yes.
I mean, these are real, right? Fear stops me from asking for what I think my worth is. So I don't know, have you heard some of these before, Rachel?
Yes.
The feeling arrogant, right? Fear stops me from sharing my thoughts and speaking up, talking about what I can provide to people. And by the way, everyone, thanks for putting things in the chat. I'm not naming everyone because, I want to make sure we honor everyone's, sort of, privacy in a way, even though you're here, and we have some similar fears. Fear for not being seen as valuable as I think I am.
Yeah, these are very common. We're going to address that. So the first thing and the most beneficial thing, hopefully, for each of you to leave with is taking action. I could tell you all the tips and tricks of, how to ask, how to overcome all these things. Quite honestly, you could get them on the internet for free or use AI and get that information for free. It's not the information, it is putting it in action. So the most important thing you could do today is understanding where that fear comes from and then taking those small little steps to overcome them. And so let's first talk about what is fear. And so if I want to just really simplify it, fear is an evolutionary trait. So imagine if you were in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness with another animal, either your food or their food. We evolved this way. So when you think of any two animals there, if one person is going to be food and they're not running away, they will be food. And so fear is something that we intrinsically have for survival. The challenge, though, is that we are no longer these cavemen running away from, tigers and bears. As humans today, I think sometimes the fear is much larger in our head than what is in reality. So, for example, if I present to you guys and it's a dud and people are kind of falling asleep, is that going to kill me? No. I mean, I'll feel kind of sad and embarrassed, but it's not going to kill me. And so it's just important to recognize that our fears in our head are a bit outdated for today's modern society. And so when we think of the fears that we still have as a residual part of evolution, today we have overthinking, perfectionism, procrastination, all these ways where we kind of stop ourselves from asking our worth. And so with these fears, if you think of what are the most common fears, some of them are very practical. I mean, we're afraid of spiders and snakes and flying and thunder and lightning because these can literally kill you. However, if you look at some of the social fears, social phobia, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of loneliness, these are real fears. And back in the day, if you want to think of us all as cavemen, if you were in your tribe and nobody liked you, and the whole village captured a buffalo and there wasn't enough to eat, and you were the one person nobody liked, you probably were not going to get your fair share of that buffalo. Versus if you were the popular one, everyone loved you and respected you, you'd probably get the best piece. So there is an evolutionary reason why we worry about our status in society, meaning we don't want to be rejected, we don't want to fail. But again, it's so outsized in our brains that it does stop us from, getting our worth, asking for our worth, and it does not hurt us at the end. And that's what we want to address today. So just know that a lot of these fears, these social fears, are very common. And that was part of the reason why I had everyone put in their chat what their fears were, because you'll see, hey, a lot of people are afraid of rejection or hearing the word no. It's normal. And I think once you realize these fears are normal, just the way fear of heights is kind of normal, you realize, okay, it's not something I have to be ashamed of. It's just something I can address. So first, let's talk about what's the impact. The reason I personally really care about this topic is because I work with founders, men and women. And we all know there's a pay gap. But there's also within the entrepreneurial community also, a fundraising gap or, getting customers gap. And on average, women undervalue their services. And in fact, they on average charge almost 28% less than men. So there is a real consequence to the fear and risk aversion. So let's address that today. And additionally, again, knowledge is not enough without action, without accountability. I could tell you whatever I want, but it fades very quickly. And here's an example that will help kind of solidify what I mean by that. So if I were to ask somebody, hey, you're out of shape and you want to get in shape, what do you do to be healthy? We know to eat well, we have our nutritional guidelines, we know to exercise. I mean, we literally have PE classes in elementary school. So we know to exercise, we know to eat our fruits and vegetables. But if knowledge was the answer, then why is it that 42% of the US population is obese? And in fact, heart disease is the #1 killer. 80% of those cases are preventable. It's not the knowledge, it's the doing. So if you are that person who's really out of shape, you're like, you know what? I don't want to be that statistic. I want to get healthy. What do? A smart person wouldn't just try to figure out themselves. They would hire a personal coach. So a personal trainer. So the personal trainer first figures out what is it that you want to achieve. And then they customize approach to you. So you don't like to run, but you like to do weights. Great. Let's create a workout routine similar to that and creating accountability. So week 1, you're just standing on the treadmill. Week 2, you're jogging on the treadmill. Week 3, you're actually starting to use weights. And maybe you can have a long-term goal of running a marathon. So part of this is also the accountability and showing up for yourselves and for your accountability partner. And we'll get into that as well. So the last thing is, I think we kind of touched on it of what people's fears are. I hear sometimes that people say, I'm just waiting to be confident. And with that confidence, I can ask. The reality is, we've shown in brain psychology that it's by doing something you didn't think was possible and getting a positive result and thinking, oh, I didn't know I was capable of that. So actually the secret of confidence is just doing it and realizing it wasn't that bad and then doing more and more. So it's by taking these small actions that will actually build the confidence that a lot of people are looking for.
Rachel, this is amazing. And I'm just going to pause for 2 seconds. Stephanie has a question. Steph, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I think something that comes to mind for me in this situation is I don't know how much to ask for most of the time, right? It's like if you are operating on your own, how do you freaking figure out like what the average cost of blah, blah, blah should be? And like, not all services are exactly the same. Some have more bells and whistles. Some are, you're hiring a team, not just an individual. And so there's just like a lot of calculus that makes me overthink it sometimes, that makes me uncomfortable actually asking.
So, it's interesting. Before I joined Google, I actually looked on YouTube, ironically, how to negotiate. And one of the videos had said, never put out the first number. Wait for the other person to say the first number, and then you kind of respond to that. So it's, quite the irony. But what I personally have done is I've asked people, what's your budget? Because the reality is if I could do all these things for you, but you have like $100, I mean, there's not much I can do anyway. And it helps you as a business person kind of filter out what is an appropriate project for you. So I start usually with there. And then what I do is say, okay, based on what you have, I can go as big or small as what's necessary for you. I have also found that when you give a bit of wiggle room. So what I've done in the past is say, I have charged clients this amount. And it's been actually surprising where people's like, okay, sounds fair. And I thought, wow, I would have thought that's way out of your budget. But if you are willing to pay that and I can back it up with the value I'm going to provide because I can give you case studies and, and whatnot, then, for me to have assumed their budget was smaller and to undercharge would have left money on the table.
Rachel, this brings up something as you're talking. I think if we flip it and say, well, what is the what is the person that you're negotiating with thinking? And I've noticed just in negotiating for services that I've needed or providing, it really helps the person that you're pitching to know. Basically, it helps you to ask the question of what your budget is, because they sometimes don't know what they should pay. So it kind of takes back agency to the asker, to us or to staff, where we're really kind of driving the conversation and leading the conversation. So it's interesting, right? Like, we think someone isn't going to go for our fee, but if we ask what they're looking for first, it helps them make a decision, because I don't think a lot of people know what to charge. I don't know. Have you found that?
Yes.
Yes. I hope it was clear. I was a little rambled there. But.
No. I absolutely agree. So when there's for example, when people ask, help me do an AI strategy, and thus, how do I create a whole company strategy? It's such a new area. People don't know what is a fair market value. So I help them and say, okay, well, I just had this client and I charge X, this amount, and this is what I can help you. I think you don't need this, so maybe I could charge you less, but maybe we can add X, Y, and Z that will be customized to you. So I agree that there are services that people don't know what they should be paying. And then the second part is, I think when you think of perceived value, you think of, say, a Chanel purse. Is a Chanel purse really worth 10x of another brand? Probably not. But why is it that people perceive Chanel to be more exclusive and a higher value than something else? When you're a solopreneur, when you're a small business, and you're working for free, people may perceive you in a different way than if you were charging your market value. So it does hurt some companies and solopreneurs when they undercharge, because I think people assume they're bringing in less. What I do is say, look, I charge this much, but if my job is to make you money and I can at least make that back, like, I'll give you the money back, because I'm confident I will make at least that amount. So I pay myself off. And when I position it that way, they're like, all right, if you think you can make that much for me, great, I'll pay you what you're asking for.
Yeah, that's great. I think the other response in the chat is people want something for cheaper anyway. So there may be a point where you can name a number, but you're going to get negotiated down. So there's just a lot of nuances.
Yeah. And another thing you can think about is, what are non-financial things you can ask for? So I'll give it an example. I sometimes do AI trainings of just like, here's the basics of AI training and da-da-da. And I had a citywide library actually ask me to help. And they didn't have a ton of money. And I said, well, corporate clients, I charge this amount. I recognize you're a library. You may not have a lot of public funds. And they said, oh yeah, what you're asking for, I could give you a small fraction of that. And I said, well, actually, what's more important to me than the money is, given that you are the one library in this entire city and you have a whole long mailing list I don't have access to, here's what you could do for me. I just want you to promote me, get my name out there, because that advertising to me is more valuable than the dollar amount you could give me anyway, and it's free for you. So there's other creative ways to make it a win-win besides just what they're giving to you financially. All right, let's move on, because we're okay. So I'm gonna have everyone pull out your phone again, and sorry, did we just go through this slide? No. I provide value, but fear stops you from asking for more. That fear is blank. Now let's write down what that fear is and how scary that feels to you. So for example, if I said, I provide value, but my fear is rejection. And that fear of rejection is like an 8. So just write down on your phone what that fear is, and from 1 to 10, how scary that will be for you.
And also feel free to add in the chat if you want, and we can compare notes.
Yeah, fear of losing the deal. All right, we're getting some good responses. So here is part of the fear hacking. Those who would be open to sharing, please, unmute yourself, or if you feel more comfortable putting in the chat, because the benefit is, number one, when you express your fear, I think that's scary, and it's like a micro step of getting over that fear. But I think when people start seeing other people's fears, they realize, oh, I have the same fears too.
Feel free to either raise your hand or go right ahead. Sheenie, go right ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone, it's Sheni. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I think I put one in the chat. One of my bigger fears is fear of seeming arrogant, particularly because a lot of us who are formerly from Google, there is a bit of a reputation of that, former people from Google, they had these big compensation packages and they have high expectations, and smaller startups feel like there's this automatic perception of they're going to want too much and we can't afford them, even with the downturn in the market. I think I've heard that through the grapevine so much at this point that it almost gives me that fear of if I ask for what I think I'm worth, I'm going to sound arrogant. They're not even going to consider me. I should hide Google as much as I can from my resume going forward. These are the fears in my mind right now that I don't know what to do with.
So I would challenge that. It's a common fear, but I would challenge that. So, for example, if I were working, I had a client where I said, look, I managed $500 million of revenue. It was Google, it was a big company, but look, I'm comfortable with very large numbers. You're a startup, you're not Google, but if the same mechanisms that I was able to generate that revenue at Google, I bring to you. So it's kind of taking the big company thinking at a global scale and bringing it to your company so that you can see what the value is of working with me versus somebody else who may not have that perspective. So I've actually seen it as a pro versus con of having the experience at Google. How I've positioned it in the past too is, you kind of know which type of companies are going to pay more. Obviously, if someone just got a huge amount of funding or it's a big corporation, their budget might be larger. And so I'll start out with say, well, my corporate clients, I've charged this amount. Pause. They're like, oh my God. Well, I was like, well, okay, but I get that you don't have the major budget of a large, S&P company. So let's work together. Let's talk about what you need, what your budget is, and let's figure something out that works for you. And also I hone in on again, if I'm not making you money, you should be firing me. I shouldn't be taking money from you. So, the intent of working together is that I can help you and I will earn my keep.
Thank you. Yeah, makes sense.
All right. Anyone else want to share before we move on? All right. Exercise number 2. Let's list on your phone 3 things you've done in the last year that's created a measurable or perceived value. And I want you to quantify those results. And the purpose of this exercise is sometimes, especially where, it's a slower economy where we hear more no's, whether it be, job offers or interviews or getting new customers. And sometimes it gets into our heads. We're like, oh, I thought I was so valuable. Maybe I'm not. But sometimes you have to remind yourself. And just the last year, hey, I did X, Y, and Z. This is what it created. This is what I can prove. So even this workshop, I had a client where, he started from one industry. He was moving to something else. He wasn't sure. And I was like, hey, just try it. And I'm going to challenge you to just ask to see if someone would pay for this. And within a week, he got 3 clients. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, what I did worked. So now I feel more confident in what I'm doing. So I challenge each of you to think about 3 things you've done this year that, you could quantify the results of. Steph, it feels hard because we're not thinking hard enough of all the various values. So I'll give an example. I exercise daily. I meditate daily. I eat vegetables daily. It's just my thing. And I have a friend who called me Coach Rachel because she says every time I hang out with her, I make her hike, do some sort of exercise, stretch, whatever. Because for me, I'm like, look, I'm in front of my computer all day. If I'm gonna have my afternoon or evening to spend with you, I also need to exercise. Let's do 2 in 1. And so it's my non-negotiable. I need to exercise. So if you're going to hang out with me, you're going to exercise with me. And she has said that it has been transformative because I'm the only person who forces her to exercise. Now, is there a monetary part of that? Well, I mean, how much would it cost for her to have a personal trainer? But I'm doing it for free. How much would it cost to have someone be an accountability buddy? But I do that for free. So that's one small way of where it's just what I do in life, but it's a tangible benefit to somebody else.
Okay, we can do this, guys. Let's try.
Yes. Yes. We're looking at everyone's faces. It looks like people are still working, but whenever you're done, I guess maybe put in the chat done, and then we can move to the next exercise. Because it is hard. And the hope is that when you list these 3 things down, you think, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was creating all this value for people around me just without even thinking about it. How are you guys doing? Yes, yes. I love the last comment, and it's interesting. I remember Google, they had the I am remarkable or something like that, where you had a, but think of that amplified, because sometimes you realize the stuff you do just because you are who you are and you're not actively looking to charge people for, you create a lot of value. So it's, sometimes you realize, oh, like if for example, if you are an entrepreneur, or you're thinking of the value you bring to a company, it's more than you realize just by being who you are. Why do you feel you provide more value when it's free versus paid? Well, there's also a mind shift. What are you doing for free that will further incentivize you if someone's actually paying you to do it?
No, it's wild in that assessment that like everything that I listed there, I did for no pay. And then the things that I am getting paid for, I just don't feel particularly, good at delivering or whatever, right? Like there's some kind of blockage there. It's weird.
Yes.
A weird thing.
That's a thing. People say don't do your hobby as a job because then it won't be fun anymore. There is kind of, and they've said, okay, if you, whatever, they've done studies where, you know, you solve a puzzle of some sort, you do it for free versus getting paid, you're more incentivized to continue doing it if it's for free. My hypothesis is probably just having the autonomy and agency to choose to do it versus not. You know, one way I think about it is, you know, one of the greatest benefits of starting your own thing is you can say no to a client or a project you don't want to do. And I have done that. And it sucks because you know what you were getting paid at Google. You're like, oh my God, like, you know, I shouldn't be turning away work. But sometimes I remind myself, like, if I don't want to work with this person or work with this project, I don't have to. So there, you know, that is a definite benefit from, you know, in the past where that was your job. You had to do what you were supposed to do. All right, I think maybe we can move on. Okay. So pick one item in your audit, and I'm going to have you guys share in the group chat. If you don't feel comfortable saying I did, you can say I rock star I know did, but you can say I did blank in the last year that created blank. And the purpose of this is sometimes you say, oh, wait a minute, you did that, but I did that too. Oh, I didn't think of that as something valuable. So I encourage everyone to just put in their chat one of the items in your audit and the tangible benefit you created for somebody else. So hopefully I just see a whole flood of comment. Oh. Nice. Love it. Very cool. I'll wait for one more comment and then we can move on. Nice. Excellent. Love it. Nice. Very cool. You know, it's interesting because, you know, if I'm a fractional chief commercial officer, as the name infers, I'm there to make people money, but I encourage you to look through that chat. A lot of you are creating tangible financial benefit for others. So if you think about it, you're like, if I'm helping you make money, shouldn't you have a little piece of that pie? Shouldn't you know, if you're doing the work to help them, I mean, you should be part of reaping the rewards. So that's another way of thinking about the value you provide. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. All right, so we're going to use AI. And the reason I have this exercise with AI is because sometimes when we do something ourselves, it's, you know, we can look, you know, kind of downplay our achievements. And sometimes when you have an objective third party, it's easier to kind of see it in a black and white way. And so the way I describe this is almost like if you wear an outfit, you can't really see how it looks like. Sometimes a friend has to hold up a mirror and say, hey, this is how you look like. And then you can see the pros and cons, but at least it's an objective way of seeing yourself. And so even more objectively, it's where AI is not going to try to be nice to you, doesn't want to hurt your feelings. You could tell it to be as nice or as brutally honest as you want it to. I have a full prompt here. I think most of the people in this audience are very comfortable with Gen AI. But the reason I have kind of a longer prompt here is because I also do, you know, AI workshops, and I've had people where in my classes, they literally have never signed into ChatGPT. I have to show them how to sign in to ChatGPT and set up an account. And so for those who are less comfortable with AI, here's a prompt where, I encourage you, given that everyone's muted, to just voice text this. Those who are very comfortable, you could do, prompt however you would normally. But basically what you want AI to help you with is, help you think of specific reasons why, as a salary negotiator, someone should pay you more based on blank of what you've achieved and the things that you have delivered. And, be persuasive, be confident, make it nice and succinct. And with that item that you've done, I encourage you to take a look and ask yourself, oh, are they pointing out things that I may have undervalued or may not have considered of my worth? So let everyone do that for a few minutes. And when you're done, I guess just ping us in the chat. Do I have a preferred AI tool? So, I did these slides for another group and I realized I probably should have said Gemini, given the audience. I personally use all of them. So my go-tos are, if I want something that I need reliable data on, I'll ask Perplexity. And I will, I'll always double check the source, because even if you say list source and the exact page number, paragraph where it's going to be, and I look, I'm like, wait, it's not there. So all AI will hallucinate, including Perplexity. For writing, people say ChatGPT is good. I personally have found, on average, Claude and Gemini better. But what I tell people is like, look, especially if they're all free accounts, just cut and paste the same prompt and just see which one you like and just use that one. People have asked, is it worth to pay for ChatGPT? I was paying for it, and then once I was, creating a proposal, and I, put it on ChatGPT on the paid version, and then just out of curiosity, I did it on Gemini on the free version, and Gemini was better. And I was like, wait, why am I paying for this? So it's a free for all. I don't know.
Thanks. It was kind of a side conversation, but thanks for answering.
Mm-hmm. I actually started using Manus, which I like. And then also for some people, someone had asked how I created the slides. This one I created on Canva as just the templates, but I actually started playing around with, what was it, like Beautiful AI? No, I can't remember. I'll let you guys know next time. But in the next series, you'll see some of them have a different look. Yes, Gemma. Gemma's the one I used. How are you feeling about this? Should we move on to the next slide? So first, when you saw an objective way to ask for your worth on AI, how did it feel? Anyone want to volunteer on the chat group? Empowering. What else? Like a boss. Yes. What I like about this exercise is that it can point out, ROI or benefits that you may not have considered. And it just makes you feel more confident when you're talking to, a client, a customer, etc., where you think, yeah, actually, this will help you with X, Y, and Z. Cool. All right. So we are going to get into the meat of this. So I can have you ChatGPT all day long, or actually have you do it out in the real world. So here is an exercise. We're first going to ask AI to help us create a non-cringy ask of, hey, you are a client, a friend, etc., who's already getting value because I provide you with blank. Give 3 non-cringy ways I can ask for $5 for this service. Make it natural, confident, show what's in it for them. Now, the reason why it's $5 is because I talk to a lot of people who are consulting for the first time, creating some sort of value for the first time, and think, I've been helping my friend for free, and I don't want to ask. But eventually, if you want it to be a sustainable company, revenue has to come in. And I always challenge, look, the exercise is to ask. It's not the dollar amount. I'm helping you train your brain that you do provide a tangible financial value, meaning people will pay for your services. Now, if somebody who you're helping already is not willing to give you $5, they're never going to be a client anyway. And quite honestly, you probably don't want to be continuing to help them because it's not worth your time if your objective is to have a sustainable business. So but people ask, well, how do I ask? It's a friend, or it's going to be awkward. Okay, well, let's offload it to a third party like AI. Help them think of 3 non-cringy ways. Just ask them for $5, and how to. And as you look at the answers, pick one that you like. Yes.
I have a funny question about this prompt. So it reminds me, so at Google, you may recall, like, it's just such a warm and welcoming culture, like, and you can have coffee chats with like anyone, right? You would go on MoMA, look up the directory, find someone who is in a team you're interested in. People would generally, unless they were super busy at the time, would give you their time for a chat. And so now out in the real world, I think I'm trying to be more mindful of people's time, and that it's not like you're not in an office culture per se. So it's like wanting to balance helping people and, your particularly former colleagues and friends and those in your network with your time, and giving them value as you state in this exercise. But also being mindful of my time, and my time is worth money, right? So like I've seen some other people do it really well, where they will slot in like a certain number of pro bono per se consultations and then charge. But like, do you have any feelings or thoughts on that?
So there's 2 things. There is the, I guess, BD part of where, people are saying yes to meeting up with you. And then the second part, and, how to get them to say yes. And then there's the second part of how do you get them to, if I understand correctly, pay you for the things instead, or I'm sorry, how to limit the freebie, and then how to convert that into a paying project.
Yeah, because like even myself, like I do want to still like have those chats with people and help people out without charging them as much as possible, because people have done that for me. Oh my, Stephanie on this call, she's done it for me, right? And so I think that should always exist. Like I would hate for that ever to go away, but at the same time, like at what point is it worth like sharing a prompt like this and saying, okay, now is a good time to charge for a service?
what I personally do is on my website, it says I'll do, a free audit for 15 minutes. So it's
Yeah.
like, hey, you get it for free for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
More than that, let's just establish that, this isn't volunteer. This is a business. And if I'm providing you value, I need to get something in return. So I think when you very transparently say, I'll provide this much freebie, but eventually, or sometimes I've had, especially in this economy, people like to ask for free. And so I've had people say, hey, can you do X, Y, and Z and da, da, da? And I'll ask, what's your budget? And they say, we don't have a budget. And I'll say, look, I only slot so much, I only have so much bandwidth for pro bono work. Everything else is paid. If you need my help today, it would have to go into the paid bucket at some time in the future. If, I free up that smaller bandwidth for pro bono, I can, we can talk then. And I think it helps me as a business owner in a couple of ways. I mean, number one, you could if they were never going to pay you at all, it's just information for you to know. And you have to ask yourself, if your time is valuable, what are you getting out of it? It doesn't have to be financially. It could be, access to networks or whatnot, but or a learning experience, but, it does need to provide value for you as well. I think the second thing is, sometimes I've had people say, oh, well, I do need you now. Let me see what I can do. And it kind of, when you have that sort of like, look, I can help you at sometime in the future, but if you need it now, think of it like a rush charge. You pay more for expedited mail. If you need my help today, I have to move things around to give you that time. That's going to cost.
Yeah, and probably also the complexity of the ask and the conversation. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And quick thing, because I've had people ask, well, if you want to do info interviews for a job or a BD thing, and people ask, well, before when I had my Rachel Loui at Google, people they didn't know me and they would respond, and now when it's just me, they don't. And that's something I encountered the first time I did a startup before joining Google, where you come back from a big company. I was a chief strategy officer, had a big title. So people responded. And then when I was just Rachel Loui on the side, I wasn't used to so many no's. And that was actually the impetus for Hacking Fears, where, it's like a shock where you're like, oh, am I not valuable anymore? And you realize when you're selling yourself versus having the backing of a company, it is a shock. And it's kind of, you take the no's personally until you realize it's not personal. And so, to answer that of how do I recommend, reaching out to people, I always make it a win-win. Even if somebody say, hey, I can introduce you to Rachel and you can help her on this. I always say, look, let's make this a win-win. I take a look at their business. For example, if they do international stuff, I say, I'm happy to talk about any of your international needs or any perspective I can provide, whether it be tech, life science, international, think of all the things you could provide so that at least, they feel like if they would like the opportunity, they could get something in return. Steph, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I was going to add that some friends of mine who are now operating without the backing of like a big company name have actually created like loose consortiums or like groups of people who sort of can float their services together and say, hey, like, we offer XYZ, and and basically it's really like you're first in, right? But if for some reason the work becomes too much or they're asking you about an area that you don't know, right, like you have an agreement with these other people where you can actually get their expertise on it too. So it really makes you seem like you are offering way more than just your own immediate skill set, which I think has seemed really like can be a good tactic for positioning yourself as someone who's providing even more value than just your, again, immediate skills. So
yes, and to add on to that, I've seen companies where they say, hey, Rachel, if you bring in work that we could help with, we'll give you a finder's fee or a certain percentage. So, it's kind of like a win-win. All right, we got a couple more minutes left, so I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. Let's put in the chat, what's something that you can ask $5 for? It did get real. And just know the exercise is not the $5. The exercise is pushing you to ask. So let's use the exercise example. If, next time I meet up with my friend, I say, hey, I'm trying out this new service for exercise accountability. You're already paying whatever, $20, $30 per exercise class if you go to Soul Cycle or whatever. I'm $5 and I'll make it a lot more fun because we could talk about whatever you want to talk about. So, for $5, I'll actually set up a little exercise routine, which is something I would have done anyway for free. But given that I'm now pushing you to do it, would you pay $5 for it? Yeah. Harry, what I like about that, too, is you can make it customized. So could you get recipes for free online? Yes. But could you make something where you're like, look, you're trying to be whatever, keto friendly, and, I could help brainstorm because I know you like, this meat versus that or whatnot.
I just wanted to pick something that was sort of out of all the things, that I've been interested in, because I think that's part of it too, at least for me, Rachel, is kind of going out of the comfort zone of asking about a theme or a topic that I might want to explore. This is just, so that's why I kind of picked that, something a little different.
Yes. And I'll, before I get to you, Steph, so I was going to say, it was interesting because one of my, I had mentioned on another workshop where this was a business owner who already had a certain business, but his dream was to do something else. I was like, well, what's stopping you from that something else? And he had wanted to be a life coach, but, he was doing a business generating revenue and he was going to stick with this. It's like, well, just ask. And he was a person who I said picked up 3 clients in a week. He just, he went on a golf trip with 3 other people. He floated this idea. All 3 of them said, yeah, I would totally pay you for doing this. And I was like, yeah, that was one golf game. How many times have you just been out with your friends or at a networking event where people can see the value you create? What if you ask every single one of them? Imagine how many clients you would have, but the aha is you thought this would never be a business, which is why you went to something you were less excited to do, but you felt was more guaranteed. Well, now you are seeing the possibility of what you could create, and that you're now seeing that you can turn this into a paying business. You just had to go out and ask for it. Okay, Steph?
Yeah, I was going to say I know that we're at time. I'd love I think Teresa has a real question, so you should ask her, or let her go. But at the end, I'd love for you to tell us what we'll look forward to next week when we come back.
Yes. Cool. Teresa?
Yeah, I'll go quick. For $5, I'll pick your wine for any event you're going to do. So I actually did this for my friend's wedding a month ago and did not charge her, but I probably should have. So yeah.
Yeah. And think of it, if you're the bride, you're like, yeah, $5 to just take that off my list. Yeah, I think it's worth even more for sure. Okay, so we're going to think to yourselves, how scary is it now to ask for that $5 compared to what you had before? And let's make it rain. So why did we talk about $5? Let's put it into the real world. So the challenge for you is to actually go out into the world and ask anybody for $5. I've had people say, can I ask my spouse? Sure, whoever. It's the exercise of asking. It's not really the $5. But $5 is just enough where it's like, okay, it's something, but it's not going to break anyone's bank account. And the accountability is that for next week, as you know, we're charging $5. Why? It's not for the money. It's refundable, I think, Steph. It's really to keep you accountable. because we know that loss aversion hurts more than gaining. So if I said, I'm going to give you $5 for asking, you may not do it, but I'm like, hey, look, you just lost $5. So now you got to ask. It hurts a little bit more. Typically when I do these workshops, it's 20. So it hurts a little bit more. So people are more skin in the game, but you know, for purpose of this, we're just asking for 5. If you want to psychologically do 20, that's fine as well. But I encourage you all to look at this QR code, sign up now, because if you don't, by tomorrow, you're gonna, I don't want to do it. And then you're not going to do it. Again, if you decide next week, there's no way, no how you're going to join. It's refundable. This is for you, but it is really to keep you accountable and showing up next week, because we want to hear how it went. And some people choose not to do it because, you know, they get embarrassed or whatnot, and that's okay. But again, this is also just the accountability to keep you going on this route. Otherwise, you've just wasted an hour of doing these exercises, but it doesn't really help you.
This is great, Rachel. I'm very excited for the next session. I think everybody is. Any last questions, anyone? Okay, really looking forward to next week. Rachel, anything, parting thoughts?
Yes,
Yes.
You have to do this for you. You're not doing it for me. You're not doing it for anyone else. You're doing this for you. I want to see every single Xoogler female earn their worth. It drives me insane when people don't, because I'm like, oh, you're undervaluing yourself. But also think of it, this is why women are getting underpaid. Do it for the other fellow women that, need to get paid their worth.
Yeah. And then we could teach
this.
We're modeling it, right?
Yes.
And then you could have another workshop. I just see it. We're going to be asking, and look forward to next week. Thanks everybody for coming. See you next week. And that's it. I'm going to sign us all off. Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rach.